Hey guys, and welcome to our first Words of Radiance episode. Couple things to note for this episode. We had some internet issues, so the video freezes pretty frequently as throughout this episode, but the audio is still fine. And just a reminder that we launched a Discord server, and you can come join us and talk about all sorts of different things in the Cosmere and with other people. So come join us in there and enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is the first week of Words of Radiance. We have finished The Way of Kings last week. We did our finale episode, and we are jumping right in to Words of Radiance. What are your hopes and dreams for this book? Before we really hop into it, I want to know what you are most looking forward to, what you hope is in the book, what you hope isn't in the book, if you have any of those. We can start with you, Paul.
Yeah, so certainly some answers for one. For two, this is, as I've learned, this is Shallan's book. So I'm really hoping to see some really good action and exciting content from Shallan. As we saw at the end of The Way of Kings, it got really exciting, so I'm really hopeful for that. I'm excited to begin to love Shallan chapters, so that's my hope for the book.
Okay, Eliot.
Hopes and dreams, huh? That's a big question there. I would echo Paul's on Shallan. I think Way of Kings was a really cool setup for her character, but I really want to know like where she's headed now. I feel like we didn't really get into the depth of who she is, what she struggles with. We just got a lot of hints. We got a lot of ominous hints. So I'm real curious to see where she goes, and I hope it's this might be setting the bar too high, but hopefully as interesting a journey as we just had with Kaladin in Way of Kings. But I think the second thing that I just dying to know about is Voidbringers. I really want to know what is up with those Voidbringers. Are they Parshendi? I'm on the hunt for that. I'm hoping I get an answer to that in the next 1,300 pages.
Yeah, in reference to his question from before, Parshendi, no Dalinar. That's my
Right?
favorite. It's my favorite
Exactly.
still. Yeah, I actually am very curious about that. But yes, I agree.
So when we started The Way of Kings, I asked you guys expectations on not only The Way of Kings, but the Stormlight Archive. And Eliot, you said they were extremely high. And then at the end of The Way of Kings, you said that that Way of Kings met your expectations. So I'm assuming it's the same for Words of Radiance. Your expectations are still that high?
Honestly, I think my expectation for Words of Radiance might be slightly below Way of Kings just because it's a book 2. My expectations for a book 2 are always slightly lower just because, I mean, sequels, follow on movies, anything that attempts to follow something that's been done really well the first time is really challenging it's hard to live up to that first instance of this was awesome. So I'm expecting Words of Radiance to suffer from that just a little bit and that it'll pale slightly in the shadow of Way of Kings. That's just totally a guess. So my expectations are a little bit lower, which probably works in Words of Radiance's favor probably.
That's fair. What are your expectations, Paul?
I think I'm slightly the exact opposite. I think my expectations for this book are a little higher, since we don't have as. I'm assuming we won't have as much of like an intro slow period to this book. They'll kind of be a quicker takeoff there. My expectations are super high for what all's going to happen. A little higher than with The Way of Kings, but I'm super excited either way. So,
Gotcha. Cool. I can definitely see it both ways. How you just came off this huge high of The Way of Kings, and it was really great, and so you're fully expecting to be led into it more slower, and ramp back up slower. But then at the same time, we don't have to put in the groundwork of Roshar that we did in The Way of Kings. So you already know where we are. Already know the characters, some of them at least.
Throw us right into the action.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have 2 words for the prologue through chapter 2? We'll start with Eliot.
I do have 2 words. As always, my 2 words for the first few set of chapters is assassins and change.
Assassins, change. Paul, do you have 2 words?
I do. I have shadows and rhythmic.
Rhythmic and shadows, change and assassins. All right, let's discuss these words. I'm most curious about rhythmic. Was that your word, Paul? Let's start there. What does rhythmic mean?
I hope I didn't make you too excited about it. That so rhythmic was mostly with something that is, I think, a little exclusive to catch on the audiobook. As we hear in the prologue, where the Parshendi admit to being responsible for Alucard's death. There's a very you hear how they speak, and it's a very kind of bizarre rhythmic like pacing to their voice, and it really stuck out to me. It was very eerie and everything, and so that was the main reason why I chose that. It's not incredibly like applicable to the entirety of the episode, but it was something that super stuck out, like very well stuck out to me, like with the stuff going on there. So I thought it was notable enough to be one of my 2 words. And with my other word, shadows, it's a little bit of everything. So one of which we'll talk about, is the physical descriptions of Yasna's shadow, which I thought was super exciting, and I want to talk about before Elliot has the chance. I'll be honest, but that, as well as I think there was a good amount of foreshadowing in these opening chapters in the prologue, as well as a lot of appearances with Shadesmore. So I thought it was pretty fitting to have shadows as one of my 2 words.
Sure. Elliot, you want to tell us a little bit about yours?
Yeah, mine aren't too crazy thinky or anything. My first thought after reading this chapter was just assassins everywhere. Everyone is trying to assassinate everyone else. We just came off of Way of Kings with Zeth assassinating everyone and their mother, and then getting sent off to assassinate Dalinar. Here we launch right into Words of Radiance with the very first sentence being, I'll have to read it in a second, but Yasna is prepared to assassinate someone. Like, what? So, lots of assassins. And then change mainly for the Kaladin chapter that we get, but also kind of Shallan as well. Fitting for the start of a book, we're launching right into a lot of change for our characters. The men of Bridge 4 are encountering a lot of change with basically the shift from bridgemen into soldiers. It's even noted, I think, at the beginning of chapter 2 that it seems like everything in Kaladin's life, every change is marked by a high storm. And I thought that was kind of cool. So, change.
Gotcha. All right. So, kind of tied into your assassins, Elliot, which we'll talk about here in a second, but we do have a spell check for this week. For just one word, and it is the name of Elokar's wife. And I'll have Elliot go first. And how would you like to pronounce this name?
All right. Elokar's wife, as I read it, I pronounced itself as Aesadan.
Okay.
Aesadan.
Paul, how do they say it in the audiobook?
Elliot was very close. As far as I remember from the audiobook, they say Aesadan. I believe, yes,
Okay.
Aesadan.
Like Shallan, Aesadan. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so with that, I probably overcomplicated the spelling again, but my guess as to how to spell Aesadan was actually ACESADAN. Udon.
Ace. Wait, can you say that again?
Yes, ACEUDON. It's probably way off, but way
About
up.
50%.
Yeah, it's not your most accurate,
Okay.
but it's certainly not your least accurate either. It's AESUDAN.
Fair.
Yep, Aesudan is Elokar's wife. And
Hey, Sudan. Got it.
jumping into the prologue with where we hear about Aesudan for the first time. Does anyone want to lead us off here? It's the night that Gavilar was killed from Yasna's perspective. Go for it, Paul.
Yes, I do want to leave this off. I want to leave this off partly because I picked up on something right away that I knew Elliot would pick up on, but I wanted to have it known that I remembered this as well and actually did my research back in the Way of Kings
Attaboy.
as to where this was applicable. And I just wanted to get this off my chest before Elliot obviously brings it up, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, great point, Elliot. So we get a lot of, a flashback chapter basically for Yasna, where we see the night where Gavilar is assassinated, and there's a lot of awesome stuff here. And right off the bat, it talks about Yasna's shadow going towards light. And I was like, I know we heard that instantly, and that was with the Amiens. We learned about Axes in an interlude chapter in the middle of the book, and so there has to be a connection there. I don't know exactly what it is. It doesn't seem likely that Yasna is Amiens, from what I understand. So I don't know if that's a thing with all Amiens, or if she is an Amien. I feel like that would be some strange plot twist, which is kind of possible. Or I don't know if that's another thing, like maybe to do with Spren or something like that. But yes, I just wanted that to be known that I noticed that, and so very cool.
Good thought, Paul. I agree.
Thank you very much.
Just one other thing I'll tack onto that. Yeah, you hit on all the questions I have too. I'd originally assumed when we read that chapter about Axes that shadow thing had to do with him being Amiens, but that clearly seems to now not be the case. So maybe it has to do with like the Order of Knights Radiant that perhaps Yasna is pursuing or is aligned with or whatnot. But I don't know. Now I'm confused.
So the only thing I'll say here is when this happens, Yasna, this has happened to Yasna before, and it's not a constant thing that happens to Yasna. So she noticed it when it does happen, and she also is afraid that she's cursed. So she sees her shadow going the wrong direction, and Sadius just kind of walks right through it, and then Yasna's kind of alarmed and looks around, but nobody's noticed it, or at least she thinks nobody's noticed it. And then she kind of like goes about her day, but then her day gets even more strange about like 5 minutes later as she accidentally falls into Shadesmar for the first time. But she goes and meets with, does she meet with the assassin after Shadesmar or before?
After.
Okay. So look, we can talk about Shadesmar for now. She describes it as a sea of beads, like we've seen Shallan describe it as. And she's like frantically looking around and touching a bunch of beads, and she finds like a lamp, the palace itself, like a whole bunch of different things. And she finds a statue, which I'll come back to in a second. She finds a statue, and then later she kind of personifies it to defend herself against some shade, oily being. What are your guys' first impressions of this?
My first impression of kind of the whole interaction, at least with Shallan falling into Shadesmar, is she figured things out kind of quickly, and I don't quite understand. I mean, this is kind of just a testament to her brilliance, but we do see her like stumble into random things like a cup and whatnot, and with this statue. Um, I don't fully know what to make of it, but it does seem like she has, I guess, the power to still like create things in the cognitive realm, I guess. Like more tangible things by almost manipulating these beads or whatever. Still kind of confusing and fuzzy, but we do see that she is able to like kind of put things together, I guess. So there's it's bizarre. I honestly don't know entirely.
My my thoughts on this were before she goes into Shadesmar, she sees the shadow, like the oily surfaced shadow kind of form this figure, and then she goes into Shadesmar, and then I think she sees that same figure again in Shadesmar, right? That's why she kind of animates the statue to defend herself. On first read through, I read those shadows as rather antagonistic or meaning her harm, kind of like we thought first of the symbol heads that were coming after Shallan. You read that chapter, oh, they're chasing her, oh, they're trying to get her. But then when you kind of read it again, I thought, same as I thought on the symbol heads again, maybe they're not necessarily out to get her. Maybe this figure is like trying to guide her. Maybe it's trying to get her to go into Shadesmar, and then when it's in Shadesmar, he's trying to provoke her into doing things, interacting with the beads that are there to do things by kind of coming after her. I wasn't really sure, but I kind of had a feeling that oily shadow may not be quite as bad or enemy like as maybe it seemed at first.
Sure. The last time that we saw something described as oily and shadowy was in a Dalinar vision, actually. And he is fighting what he describes as the Midnight Essence. And their skin is described as oily, reflective, and when you stab them, a bunch of smoke comes out. So that's the last time we've seen something described this way, but you're right. It doesn't attack her, especially after she summons the statue to sit in front of her and look menacing. I do want to read a quote from this section. Yasna held up a second bead, the statue she'd sensed earlier. She gave it power, and other beads collected before her, taking the shape of the one of the statues that lined the front of the feast hall. The statue of Telenolat Elind, Herald of War, a tall, muscular man with a large shard blade. Now, with that in mind, I want to go back to The Way of Kings and read part of that prologue. This is Szeth. You're in the perspective of Szeth. And he's between the servants' feast, or the beggar's feast, which is outside in a courtyard, and the Light Eyes feast. And this is what Szeth says. Szeth brushed by, continuing past a line of statues depicting the 10 heralds from ancient Vorin theology. Yezrian, Ishi, Kalek, Telenolat. He counted off each one, and realized there were only 9 here. One was conspicuously missing. Why had Shalash's statue been removed? King Gavilar was said to be very devout in his foreign worship, too devout by some people's standards. Any thoughts before I explain a little bit?
So my first thought on that might be like, while Yasna is doing these things in Shadesmar, did she like actually soul cast the real statue that was there in the hallway into like smoke or something that we've seen her do it before, and maybe made that statue disappear, and that's why there's one missing there? But the statue that she interacted with was Telenolat, and Szeth specifically knows that the one that's missing was, I forget the name you just said, but it was a different one.
Shalot, yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't seem plausible. I don't know.
Paul?
Yeah. I see the correlation, I guess, between the heralds having statues, but I guess it seems normal that there would be a statue of one of the heralds that is it like the missing one isn't the one, as far as I know, that's being displayed here, so I don't, I guess, see the correlation there. I would be more curious if it was Shalot's statue, I guess, that she found in Shadesmar, because that would be more interesting. But I don't. I guess I don't quite get the correlation, other than that there's a lot of stuff with the heralds is exciting and cool, but I don't quite get it.
Sure.
Um,
And that's kind of, you're supposed to be your reaction. It's like, oh yeah, statues, something I don't understand.
Important.
Yep. And you guys are going to kind of hate me for this, but I don't think I'm going to explain very much. I'm just going to bring it up
Of
to
course.
have you guys think about it, because you're right that
Okay.
that the statues are not the same statue. Yasna isn't like teleporting one of the statues to herself, or she might be. It's just may not be when Zeth's walking by it. But it's not the same statue, so it's a different statue that's missing in front of the Great Hall. So I just wanted to bring up statues.
Thank you
Just to
for helping
torment
my
us.
wine. Yeah,
Yep,
that's
you're
what I
welcome.
was about to say. Thank you for giving me some, just some normal food for thought for the next book,
Sure.
next several months.
Until you get to Oathbringer and read the prologue again. Yep, from someone else's perspective.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right, so moving on through Shadesmar, unless you guys had any other thoughts. Yasna goes to a meeting with an assassin, and she kind of has a discussion with, I don't remember her name, but
Liz, I believe.
Yeah,
It was Liz.
it's spelled Liss in the book. It's like Liz or Liz.
Oh yeah, probably Liz.
and you don't immediately know why this meeting is happening, but you do figure it out eventually. But the immediate reaction is, oh, Yasna hired Zeth to kill Gavilar. Wait, what? And then it's revealed like, oh no, it's not really related, but that's still your initial reaction. And Elliot, you have that in the timeline, so I just wanted to bring it up. Any thoughts there?
That was my reaction to the very first sentence of the book. I'll read it. First sentence of the prologue. You're jumping into Words of Radiance, and you get this: Yasna Kolin pretended to enjoy the party, giving no indication that she intended to have one of the guests killed. Like, stop right there. The person that we know gets killed at this party is Gavilar. Yasna's going to be the one that hired Zeth to kill Gavilar. But that, of course, we find out is not the case. But that's what I was very afraid of for the first half of this prologue here. But we find out that instead of that, she wants to potentially assassinate Elokar's wife. Did I catch that correctly?
Aesudan.
Yeah. I don't know what to think of that. We don't know anything about her yet, so we don't really have a reason to decide whether this is a good move or not. But this seems like, whoa, why is Yasna contemplating assassinating Elokar's wife? Her sister-in-law, right?
Her sister-in-law.
So I don't know where my mind was, but I never once thought that Yasna was behind Gavilar's assassination. I don't. I was like, oh, who's she trying to get after? And we do see it. Isn't like the plan just to spy on her though? At this point, she's inquiring with Liz to spy, and then
she has two envelopes, and this is the impression you get, at least, is that she lays one envelope on the table, and then she changes her mind last second and lays the second envelope on the table, which the second envelope just tells her to be a maid in the castle and keep an eye on Aesudan and report back. That's the only thing that she's planning right now. But you're under the impression that the first envelope was to go kill Aesudan right now. That was the original plan. But Jasnah takes that back and only tells her to spy.
This could be kind of a reach. So we don't know anything about Aesudan, really. We know who she is, I guess, but that's it. I have thought it's kind of interesting how seemingly pathetic Elokar is, in a sense. Like, he's kind of a whiny king, you know?
Sure.
And I think it's possible that maybe there's more to him that we don't know, and maybe that was kind of an intentional. Don't worry about Elokar. He's just a arrogant young king who doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
Maybe there's a lot more to him than meets the eye, or maybe his wife has a whole lot of stuff that we don't know about. So it's kind of becoming apparent that at least something is really important. There's just the fact that Jasnah is at least spying on her is pretty telling, but I don't know exactly what's going on there.
Any guesses, Elliot?
I really don't know at this point. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Aesudan has more to do than we think. Maybe she's more involved in the greater picture here. I mean, in back in Way of Kings, or in present day Shattered Plains, I guess we know that she's back in Kholinar, right? Kind of running the kingdom.
Yep.
While Elkar's out at the Shattered Plains. They've kind of just been assuming that she's doing a good job. Maybe there's something a little more sinister going on there. I don't know.
But during present day Shattered Plains, you're right, she is alive, and so Jasnah doesn't end up going through with this, or at least 6 years later she's still alive. So either she failed, or and she's still alive back in Kholinar, or she doesn't end up assassinating her. So
And nor does she seem like super fixated on that, or still attempting to subvert or assassinate or work against Aesudan that we've seen so far. So,
I bet later in the book I would guess that we'd see another conversation between her and Liz, and we'll see what's happened in this last 6 years and kind of what's going on there. It may not be something incredibly major, but I bet we'll figure out, like, at least why she wanted to do this, or what's going on there.
I'm guessing this is some foreshadowing for Aesudan entering the story at some point, and us getting some interactions between her and Jasnah, and maybe figuring out what that history between the two of them is, and why Jasnah wanted to have her killed at one point.
Yeah.
how much are you willing to bet? Because last prologue we had a shadow stone that never came into the story ever again.
This is true.
That'll still
This
come
is
up.
true.
That
Maybe
will
we get
still
the
come
answer
up
to
at some
the
point.
Dark Sphere in this book, and then we get the answer to Aesudan in the next book.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
better not be the case.
Bold
I would
prediction.
take finding out about the Dark Sphere in this book. I would take that for sure.
Yeah, I probably would too.
I don't think we're gonna find out in this book, but I hope.
All right. Any other thoughts on the prologue before we jump into chapter 1?
Oh,
Let's do
I
it.
do have some more on the prologue.
Sure.
So in this time, it's kind of interesting. So we find out that Liz was Zeth's owner, I guess, as well. And she kind of got rid of him. She was like, he's too good. He's a Shen man. He's too obedient. He's like storming creepy, that fellow is. She says something like that. It's a little off-putting, and Yasta also knows something is weird because she notices this Shen man who we know as Zeth before, and that was kind of interesting. So I don't actually know. Well, we know that he was sent by the Parshendi, or as far as we know, that was. But so I thought it was very weird and very like uncomfortable almost. So at the end of the prologue, Jasnah, it describes basically her witnessing the assassination of Gavilar. And then right after that, there are 3 Parshendi or Parshman behind her who apologizing and like, sorry we killed your father. Um, it was us. It needed to be done. And she's like, why? And they're like, I don't remember. I should have remembered this better, but basically
I
saying,
can tell you if you.
yes, I would appreciate it if you remember.
They tell her that he was about to do something very dangerous.
Yeah. And this was very uncomfortable to, especially to listen in the audiobook. I don't know if Trevor remembers this, but it was very sing-songy. Their voice was in the audiobook, like, sorry we killed your father, and it was like really bizarre, and I don't know, it kind of made me, I don't, it was wild. I don't know what else to say. It made me a little, I don't know, it was way too like casual. They're just like, hey, sorry about it, we had to do it. So I don't know, I'm extremely curious about the Parshendi now and about the Voidbringers, kind of like Elliot mentioned before. But I feel like specifically the audiobook and how it presented that scenario, it kind of gave me insight, I guess, onto how the Parshmen act and behave and things like that. And I thought it was actually very interesting. And I highly recommend listening specifically to the prologue for that moment on the audiobook.
Yeah, I do remember that because Kate Redding does a really good job with it.
Mm-hmm. She also, it's not important, but there was a name that she says wrong for like a good while. No, I'm thinking of something else. It's actually in chapter 1. She changes Yalb's voice, and it totally threw me off.
I don't remember
Anyway,
that, but I do believe you.
I was really confused for a while who was talking, but yes.
The sing-songiness is interesting because yeah, I don't know if that's described in the book at all, but I didn't pick up on that at all. So that's interesting and seems to correlate well with their like singing in battle. You know, song seems to be something that they're aligned with. Interesting note.
Yeah.
Speaking of chapter 1,
Mm-hmm.
Shallan is on the Wind's Pleasure, and she is drawing Shadesmar in her sketchbook. Anyone want to take this for a spin? Chapter 1.
So here at the beginning, or throughout chapter 1, really, we get some interesting bits of information about Shadesmar and about Spren, and as usual with the Shallan chapter, I'm left with more questions than answers, but we at least get some answers here. We get, I think, definitive proof. We kind of already had this already, that the Shadesmar is the cognitive realm, and we learn a little bit that it's a place, but it's not a place. It's all around us. It's kind of like an alternate reality almost, it seems like. I think Yasna describes it as like the mind equivalent of the physical like body world that we currently inhabit. So it's like the mental version of this world. And we've seen before references to mind, body, and soul. So side note, I thought this was interesting that if there's a body world and a mind world, Shadesmar, is there a third world, the soul world? And I'm curious just because when we first met Spren at the very beginning, I kind of assumed that they were like souls, that they were souls of inanimate objects. This seems to make that very clear that they're the mind equivalent of objects, which is interesting. So lots of questions about Shadesmar. Still.
The interlude that we get back in Way of Kings with the with the two,
the Ardent couple.
Yeah, the two old Ardents, and they're trying to figure out how this flame spren works. They mention the physical realm, the cognitive realm, and the spiritual realm. They do mention all three. So there's a little tidbit for you.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought that was weird. I was trying to figure out a way to, I guess, rationalize that. Because I was like, that doesn't make that much sense to me. And I almost thought of it like computer code or like binary,
the Matrix,
for example. Yeah. I was thinking, like we see like on a computer screen, you see your display, but like I guess behind there the computer probably has a tons of like ones and zeros and stuff like that or whatever.
Yeah.
Um and I thought of it kind of like that, and that the cognitive realm is the nitty gritty almost, that like we see things as the complete object,
Sure.
but kind of behind the scenes it's like this weird jumble almost. But yeah, I
So
don't still don't understand Shadesmar, but
there's a couple things that happen in this chapter, and one of them is that Yasna has arranged for Shallan to be engaged to Adolin Colin, who we know. Any
Yeah, like what?
impressions of this?
I read this and instantly messaged you guys like, what? Here's
yeah.
two of our like major characters that have never interacted with each other, don't even know each exist as far as we know. Although I guess Shallan does know who Adolin is, we find out. And then all of a sudden, chapter 1 of this book, they're engaged to be married. Like what? Wow. Was not expecting that.
I think it's funny that she just kind of goes with it as well. Like,
Right.
I, I
Yeah.
was
She doesn't even
expecting
blink.
yeah,
I was expecting a much bigger like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Like I don't even know who that is, but she was like, yes, like let's go, like
the
excited about it. I was a little surprised.
if it helps with her reaction at all, this whole time she's been thinking about her brothers and how she thinks she's abandoning her family to go to the Shattered Plains to help Yasna. But this solves all of her problems. If they're in House Colin with Shallan, then nobody's gonna touch them. Or if they do, then literally House Colin and at this point probably all of Alethkar would go help. So if she's married to Adolin Colin, who's in line for the throne, behind Dalinar and Gavilar's son, then he's like she all of her problems would be solved in her mind.
True. I also think this is important, and I actually wanted to bring up with kind of a prediction Elliot had made before. So we know Shallan has a shard blade, right? And Elliot was saying that he thinks she's going to be kind of forced to use that at some point for whatever reason. And I think it may actually be tied to the Colins. So she's been getting real close with Yasna lately, right? And Yasna has kind of been solving all of her problems, these major problems she's having. You know, she offered to, help fix like the Fabriole and stuff like that, and basically get her whole family out of this rut that they're in. And I would bet that at some point, Yasna is going to end up in some serious trouble or serious danger. And I think that is what's going to force Shallan to use her shard blade, or at least like,
You think Yasna's going to be in trouble and she saves her?
yes, that's just my
I
bold out there prediction.
I like it. I was thinking some similar thoughts, but I was thinking maybe it would be Adolin. Maybe Adolin's going to get into trouble and she's going to have to come to his rescue with her shard blade going to be blown when this little scholar girl he just got engaged to whips out a shard blade. Like, what?
That actually would be hilarious. I'd love to see that as well, honestly. But yeah, I think it's going to be something along those lines, where she's got a whole lot, I guess, in line with the Colins, that the fear of losing that is going to be what would spark that to happen.
So speaking of Adolin, Shallan going to go save Adolin. What do you guys think will be Adolin's reaction to this betrothal that his mother-in-law and his sister-in-law have set up for him?
Given his rather active dating life, that's not too thrilled. I mean, who knows? Maybe he is the guy that it really is looking for the one to settle down with, and this will be everything he's looking for too. But my guess would be he's probably not going to be too thrilled about this.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Elliot on this. I think Shallan's side was a little too quick and eager. I think Adolin's side is going to be a little more stubborn and questioning, just because I don't see anything like that going that easily in the book. I don't see it being like, oh yes and yes, like that's perfect on both sides. Like there's got to be some catch, you know. So I think there'll be some complication there with Adolin, but I bet it'll work out.
Shallan and romance has not gone so far, so we'll see where it
Yeah,
goes.
true,
True.
true.
Do you guys have any thoughts on the Santhid that's next to the boat?
That's one thing I really wanted to bring up. So one of my words I said was shadows, and part of that being the notion of foreshadowing. So I actually think basically everything we've seen up until this point, all the way through the Way of Kings, there's always been something notable that effectively seems like it could be applied later or come back later, and this is something important to note and come back to. But I actually think the Santhid isn't that important. I think it's super cool. I loved that scene, especially whenever she, goes underwater and looks at it. But I think it's basically just a almost a metaphor setting the tone that Shallan is going from, ooh, it would be cool if I did that. Like it'd be cool if I went and saw the Santhid underwater in real life to I'm going and doing that. And I think it's kind of just setting the tone for this book, and we'll probably see a lot of uh, action like this from Shallan. But I don't think the Santhid itself is actually going to be anything that important.
My only thought on the Santhid was I wondered if the Santhid was actually a bit of a metaphor for Spren and Shadesmar, because Yasna used the ocean as an analogy to describe Shadesmar. Kind of like you, Paul, were using your computer screen to describe Shadesmar. Explains it in a similar way using the ocean. She says, out here you just see the surface, but below that there's so much more that you can't even fathom. And when you Shadesmar, you're entering this whole new world. I felt like the Santhid was just kind of an example of this world has so much more in it than you can possibly. And when she goes underwater and sees that like its tentacles just reach all the way down into the darkness and keep going and have no end, it makes me wonder if Shadesmar kind of is this huge ball of yarn to be unraveled that just has no end. There's so much more there than we even think now. That was the only thing I could think of is
Mhm.
what they mean.
I think this is also a scene. I agree with that entirely, but I think this is also a scene that would just be cool on a movie
Oh
or a
yeah.
show or something like that. Just really, really cool imagery. But yeah, I agree.
Speaking
There's
of cool imagery, if you guys would like to pull up this piece of artwork that I've put in the Discord, Elliot, there's a similar picture in the book for you, but for Paul specifically, this is a picture of a Santhid from Ashley Code. And any thoughts on this picture?
That looks very different from how I internally envisioned it, but I think my internal image was very poor and not doing much justice to what a Santhid would look like. I think that's a really, really awesome picture. I really like that. It talked a lot about like the big eye kind of staring right at her, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that captures that really well.
Yeah, I was swayed a bit by the sketch, the illustration that's in the book. I couldn't quite wrap my mind around what this was being described as, kind of like a turtle and a jellyfish mixed together.
Yep.
But the picture in the book, yeah, is rather similar to this, and I really like it. The it did seem to be rather important that it has this like all knowing eye where you're like steps of this wise old creature, which this picture really depicts pretty well.
Yeah, this is one of the first pieces of fan art I ever saw from the Stormlight Archive, and I thought it was really good because it's definitely based off that sketch that you see in Words of Radiance, which is actually supposed to be Shallan's sketch. And so this picture is stepping back about 10 feet from that sketch and just including Shallan and a little bit wider view of the Santhid.
Probably not something you're going to keep as a pet.
Probably not.
If you have a big enough fish tank, you know.
Got a big enough pool.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you do get high storms, so just dig a huge ditch and put it in there.
There we go.
Fair enough.
Alrighty. Any more thoughts on this Shallan chapter?
Just something real quick on Shallan and kind of some of the change that she's undergoing. She kind of tries to process in this chapter a little bit of why Yasna carries this like presence or charisma where people just like move out of her way without her saying anything, and they immediately do whatever she asks because she just has this power. And she like asks Yasna, "How do I get that power?" And Yasna kind of explains, well, it's all a bit of an illusion, actually. If you just carry yourself and believe it, then if you have that confidence, then people will believe you. And at the very end of the chapter, Shallan tries to use that power. It's actually how she gets that chance to go look at the Santhid, as she just orders the captain, "Stop the boat and let me down." And I noted that interesting discussion there, and I like it. But I wonder if Shallan trying to become more like Yasna is going to change her in maybe a way that she. I think a lot of the charm and a lot of the good quality of Shallan is her innocence and kind of her honesty, and tackle trying to use those powers of, it's not like full on deception, but that, confidence and that, I don't know, persona. It doesn't really seem like her, and I'm wondering if that's going to change her for me the better.
Let me just get this straight. Did you just use the word honesty to describe Shallan?
I did, and I
Really?
realize I'm using honesty to describe the person probably hiding the biggest secret in this book. So I'll maybe clarify of just saying like her childlikeness and her the fact that she doesn't try to pretend to be something she's not. But see, even if you say it that way, it doesn't even make sense because she is innocence. I'll stick with innocence. She's innocent. She might be losing it if she tries to become Yasna.
I think I'm gonna take this clip out of context later for future reference.
Oh boy,
Don't worry about it.
Very cool.
gonna regret that soundbite.
All right, chapter 2. Kaladin. We have reunited with Kaladin after our break from the Way of Kings, and it is the morning after the fireside relax that he has at the end of the Way of Kings. And he wakes up after a high storm. Some of his bridgemen are showering after the high storm and whatever. And he goes on a stroll through Dalinar's camp with his men. And anyone want to pick this up?
First thing I noted in this chapter, first off, there wasn't a whole lot of like really important things I didn't think in this chapter. There's a few things for sure, but this was a lot of just kind of adjusting to the new normal, like for Bridge 4, figuring out, okay, where are we now? Where are we going? How are we settling in as Dalinar's personal guard that the Bridgemen have become, basically? And I noted the first challenge in front of Kaladin, and Kaladin notes this too. I think he's talking about it with either Teft or Moash. I forget. Moash. Kaladin did an amazing job of inspiring life back into the 25 or so men of Bridge 4. Now his task is to inspire that same life back into 1,000 bridgemen. That's going to be really hard. Kaladin did an amazing job with the men of Bridge 4 because he was able to connect with them on a personal level. Like the first thing he did was he went around and he learned all of their names. There's no way he can do that with 1,000 bridgemen. There's no way he can, personally feed 1,000 bridgemen with a stew that he spent his, life savings on, basically. So he's going to have to find new ways to breathe life into these men that are on the brink of despair, basically. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for him.
I think something that you can think about that is, yes, it's going to be a lot harder for him to make it personal for them, as he did with Bridge 4. However, Dalinar's men talk highly of Dalinar, and they are inspired by Dalinar and Dalinar doesn't know all of his men personally. So Kaladin can certainly learn something from him in order for leading men, because Dalinar's used to it, and Kaladin, I mean, he's had a squad before of, I don't remember how many was in his squad in chapter 1 of the Wave Kings, but that's the most leadership he's had before this.
I think the way that this will kind of go down, and I'm kind of excited for it. I think we're definitely going to see a lot of the duties and work. Obviously, Kaladin can't do everything, so it's kind of being allocated between his original bridge crew, right? Um, and there's kind of going to be a lot of work dispersed between them, and I think we're going to see like the inspiration he, gave to his bridge crew be spread by kind of everyone in that crew, to the 1,000 men. And I'm also excited because I think each of the original bridge crew members will kind of steadily become more notable characters. I kind of always thought of them as minor characters. You never knew which one was gonna die in the next bridge run and stuff. Kind of sad, but never got too attached to any of them, I guess. Like, Moash, and even though I do really love Sigzil, kind of all of them there. Scar, I mean, they were the major ones like Rock and Teft and everything. But I think, now that we're kind of setting into this more normal pace, I think each of them are going to become more well rounded, and we're going to learn about each of them and stuff. And so I'm really excited um, to see where that goes and to learn more about them and see how the way Kaladin affected them, how they can then take that and affect others. So
Something I'd like to highlight here: Rock has just been appointed a lieutenant in a bodyguard corps for Dalinar. Granted, he's a cook, but he still has bodyguard duties. He has refused to fight in the past. Any thoughts on this?
I don't know if I have any specific thoughts on that. I guess I've kind of assumed up to this point where if push came to shove, if Rock had to protect someone, that he would, you know, maybe he'd try to avoid killing someone, but if someone attacked one of the men of Bridge 4, I've been assuming Rock is going to jump in there and defend. Maybe I'm wrong though.
no, that you mentioned it, there's got to be a breakthrough moment, right? Like there's got to be it's going to be a really cool scene, I would guess, where Rock does jump in and either defend. It probably would be like a defense thing, like he's tasked with, protecting Dalinar or others. And when push comes to shove, yeah, I think he would fight, even though he's very against it. I bet it'll be like super awesome if he does. Like I would definitely look forward to reading that. So
I wonder though if it might be a bit of like a moral or religious dilemma for him though. I wonder if he would feel like he's betraying his faith in that moment if he did get faced with that kind of dilemma. And while yes, I think it would be cool to see Rock come out, the big burly guy come out and the beat down on the enemy, but at the same time I wonder if that would be a huge struggle for him. I've kind of gotten the impression that he like believes that's wrong for him or something like that. So it might be a little difficult for him if that becomes the case.
mm-hmm.
He refuses to kill, like to fight, is what he says, to the point where he doesn't even train. So everybody else has been training with the spear for, I don't know, about a month now, in the chasms, and he hasn't. He has been sitting there watching. So for as far as we know, he doesn't know how to use a spear. He does know how to use a bow, and we've seen that before, but he does not know how to use a spear, as far as we know. Bridge 4, I'll go get tattoos. Anyone want to see this or talk about this scene?
I thought that was super cool. Actually, I really liked that because it was kind of a it was almost like I don't know how to describe it. I want to say rebirth, but I don't know if that's fitting. This is kind of like the fresh start for Bridge 4. They're all, freed, out of their past situation, which was so horrible. And now they're, all together and they're free and they have, I guess, a normal life now. And so this is kind of a group activity where they go and kind of re-identify themselves. And I thought that was super awesome. And also it was a pretty like funny time there. And there's some funny moments and everything. And doesn't even I forgot the name already. The Parshman
Hmm.
bridgeman go with them.
Oh yeah,
Shen.
Shen.
Yep.
Yes, Shen. Yeah, that was kind of interesting. I was a little
Yeah,
confused, honestly. I mean, it made sense, but also like I was a little like I don't know. It was kind of weird.
yeah. Quick note on Shen. I totally agree. But after the events that happened, he was gonna start like pulling away from the Men at Bridge 4 and like distancing himself or kind of retreating within his shell. It seems like the opposite is happening. He comes in and he insists on getting the tattoo, which that struck me as really interesting and kind of odd. But yeah, the tattoos super interesting. I thought of Rebirth too, or kind of the we're erasing the past and here's a chance to get a fresh start kind of thing. They're covering up their slave brands with this new tattoo that means freedom. And I thought it was cool how Kaladin or somebody describes it as this is your writ of freedom tattooed on your forehead so that nobody can disagree with you when you say I've been freed because it's written right on your face. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but also incredibly symbolic that Kaladin's tattoo won't stick. The
Hmm.
fact that all of these men get to kind of erase their past and get a fresh start, but Kaladin doesn't. He does not get to erase who he was and get a fresh start. He is the way I kind of as he is forever changed by the things that have happened to him, and there's nothing he can do to erase that. That's now become so much of who he is that he doesn't get a fresh start, if you will.
Hmm. I thought of the perfect word, and you kind of mentioned it, but it's a rebranding of sorts.
Ah,
So
yes.
yeah, they're all covering up their brands, and
Yeah.
it's awesome. But yeah, yeah, I like exactly what you said with about Kaladin. He's a little further defined by this than the other bridgemen, and I think it was kind of fitting that his tattoo wouldn't go or wouldn't stick. Kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you both picked up on that because that's really cool. That from a legal perspective, I want to highlight this for a second. Shen is a parshman, and he also has a writ of freedom. So, as far as legal concerns, Shen is no longer a slave. However, as far as we know, Shen can't really think for himself. We've been told that parshmen kind of just stand there until someone tells them what to do. So Shen insists on getting this tattoo to tell everyone that he is freed. But as far as we know, he's not going to do anything with it. He just wanted the tattoo with the other bridgeman. So
I kind of thought it almost like the little like 3-year-old that's hanging out with the 8-year-olds, whatever the 8-year-olds want to do. Oh, me too, I want one too, kind of thing.
Yeah,
right.
I
But
feel the
maybe it's
same way.
more than that. Maybe it's more meaningful than we think it is.
Yeah, I don't really know where that's gonna go. Shen is kind of my biggest question mark at the moment as far as like current things that are happening just kind of casually. And yeah, I get that vibe about it that he was like, yeah, like I need to get this too. All everyone's getting it, but doesn't fully understand what's going on. We still have a lot of questions about Parchment and what they are and are not capable of and what they do and do not understand. Um Yeah, I have no clue what a freed Parshman will do. What Shen will do. I don't know. A little lost with Shen. Ever since he's been added, I know he's got to be something major, and something bigger has to happen. And I thought it was going to happen with the, like, I guess, desecration of the Parshendi in the Way Kings, where they use, bones basically to taunt. I thought stuff was going to happen there, but surprisingly, it didn't. They just kind of left him behind, and things kind of were okay. And I don't know when that's really going to come into fruition, but
I thought so too. I thought that's another thing I thought was going to become important in Way of Kings was Shen's wasn't. He was kind of more in the background whole time. We got a few interactions with him, but nothing too huge. So maybe this book we'll learn why Shen's important.
So why doesn't Kaladin go reveal himself to Dalinar?
So this is my big question coming out of chapter 2 is Kaladin makes the decision to not reveal his powers, not just to Dalinar, but also to kind of the wider community. Teft, I think, is him to, hey man, you gotta show people what you can do. You gotta inspire the men. Maybe it's not Teft, but I think it was.
It's Teft.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, interesting mindset that he's got here of I don't want to quite reveal myself yet. And I think that's probably wise. I mean, from our perspective, we know a lot more than they do, and we know that Zeth is on his way. We know that Zeth is coming. I mean, they actually talk about the assassin in white, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
That's the talk of him in the world. They don't know he's coming for them, but we know Zeth is on the way. I think the longer Kaladin can keep his abilities hidden, the better they're going to be able to face Zeth. If Zeth learns that there's another Surge Binder here in the camp, that's probably going to be target number one of his is take down Kaladin first and then go on to Dalinar. So I think in the big picture, this is probably a smart move here, but it is definitely a little bit odd. It's like we know Dalinar has seen him use the abilities before. It's just kind of a question of was he too delirious to really trust what he was seeing or remember what he saw tower out on the plateaus. So I would think Kaladin would show him his abilities and they could use that to better protect Dalinar or even use that in their plans that they're that of what comes next. But he decides not to.
Dalinar has a more forgiving perspective of the Knights Radiant than most other people, but of course Kaladin doesn't know that. So, all right. Any closing thoughts on this first episode of Words of Radiance, gentlemen?
I'm very, very excited to see Shallan's story. I'm already kind of enthralled in it and super invested. So, yeah. So I'm really excited for that. I think the Kaladin chapters are actually my least favorite so far. They seem more world building, So
Here comes the flip.
Yep.
I too am excited for the Shallan chapters here to see where she's going. I feel like things are going to get probably be exciting here once all our characters are in the same place. Once we're all on the Shattered Plains, once Shallan and you get there, then I feel like stuff can really start happening. Like the earth-shattering, groundbreaking, history-making moments might occur then. So I'm excited to get to that. If we get to that, who knows? Maybe Shallan and Yasna sink in the ocean, don't even make it. But I'm excited.
All right, we can wrap it up there. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot, and we'll reconvene next week.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.